please.
We're now live.
Thank you. Good evening and a formal welcome to this meeting this evening. We just have the one item, but we'll start with apologies for absence, please.
There's been none received, Chair, but I can see we have three councillors, online. If they could confirm they can hear us when I call their name. Councillor Hayes?
In attendance, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Mackenzie Boyle?
I can see her, but I can't hear her.
Councillor Mackenzie Boyle?
She can't hear you.
You've frozen.
You're frozen.
Shall we come back to her?
Yes. Councillor Barnard, can you hear us?
Yes, evening, can hear you, present, but I can't get my camera to work.
Thank you.
Jamie, if you can hear me, Tina Mackenzie Boyle, I'm present, but on my screen you have frozen.
Could you send her an email? Thank you. And I'm expecting Councillor Eggleston to join us online shortly. She said she'd be a couple of minutes late. So the minutes of the previous meeting, we have to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting of the committee held on the 14th of December. Do you have any questions of accuracy, please?
I was present. I'm not present there. See what I mean.
We need to state your name. Councillor Penfold.
Councillor Penfold.
Councillor Penfold was present and she's not mentioned.
I was present.
Great, thank you. Anything else? No? Can I propose then that those are with amendment, with the stated amendment, accepted as a correct record? Seconded?
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. All those in favour? Thank you.
I wasn't in attendance.
Oh, you weren't in attendance?
Sorry,
Yes. Okay. So that's correct record. Thank you. And now, declarations of interest. Members are asked to declare any disclosable pecuniary or affected interests in respect of any matter to be considered at the meeting. Any member with a disclosable pecuniary interest in a matter should withdraw from the meeting when the matter is under consideration and should notify the Democratic Services officer in attendance that they are withdrawing as they have such an interest. If the disclosable pecuniary interest is not entered on the register of members' interests, a monitoring officer must be notified of the interest within 28 days. Does anybody here have a disclosable interest, please? None? And should we ask the people online if they have a disclosable pecuniary interest?
Chairman,
Yes.
Chairman, I can now see you. I've come
great.
back.
Councillor Mackenzie Boyle.
You're welcome. Just to say that I have an affected interest in as much that I do know the Nike family.
Okay. She doesn't need to withdraw anything. No need to withdraw, but thank you.
Thank you very much.
Were there any urgent items of business?
No, non-notified, Chair. Although I can now confirm that Councillor Eggleston has joined remotely.
Thank you.
Councillor Eggleston, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Lovely. Welcome, Caroline.
Thank you.
So, item 5 is oh gosh, somebody's got their sound on. No. The conditions for public speaking have been met in the application. So can I'll just confirmed it's Ms. Alicia Bunker? Yeah. Thank you. We won't have you yet. We'll get the presentation from the officers. Thank you. And Mr. Andy Riley. Thank you. Okay. Shall we have the officers' report? Thank you, Chair. Oops.
There we are, just sharing my screen. Yeah. Good evening. My name
Chairman,
Yes? Councillor Barnard. Yes?
so I have been sitting in the car park since the start of the meeting trying to get into the council building, but unfortunately nobody can let me in. So I'm not quite sure what to do because my pass isn't working.
Hold on, Mo.
I'm outside the front entrance, so I'm not quite sure what to do. I was
Can
trying
you-
to be ever so polite about this.
Can you come round to the side, please?
Yes, I will come round to the side,
Thank
certainly.
you. I'll just adjourn
Thank
the
you.
meeting while we wait for you. Hold on. I don't know whether I stated we were adjourning online.
We're back live.
Thank you very much. Sorry about the delay. Officer Joe Mail to report, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. My name's Jo Mail and I'm the case officer on this application. The application before the committee this evening relates to a site known as the John Nike Land and was the subject of a site visit on Saturday morning. Members' attention is drawn to the supplementary report circulated yesterday and its addendum sent out today, which reports an additional letter of support received from the Berkshire Local Enterprise Partnership, proposes amendments to the wording of 3 of the recommended conditions and proposes an additional condition relating to operational noise limits. The site extends 3.78 hectares and is located at the junction of Northview and John Nike Way. It is currently occupied by a dry ski slope, which is not currently in use, Jubilee House, a 3-storey office building, which is subject to a condition restricting its use to ancillary to the leisure use on the adjacent land, and the site of the former ice rink, which has been demolished and the land roughly levelled. This plan shows the context of the site. The site is surrounded by commercial development along its northern boundary, with the Coppard Beach Hotel to the west and the recently constructed data centre on the former Hewlett-Packard site to the southeast. Residential development within Northview is located to the south of the site and to the northwest in Braeside. To the east, further residential development is being constructed on what is known as the Island site in Cane Road. The site is located within the settlement boundary and immediately adjoins the Western Employment Area as designated within the adopted development plan. It is proposed that this designation be extended upon the adoption of the new local plan to include the site of Jubilee House. As was noted at the site visit, the extent of the application site is not exactly the same as the extent of the original John Nike land. Members will recall that at the August committee, it was resolved to approve a hybrid application for a mixed-use development of land to the south of the application site, forming part of the Amen Corner South allocation. As part of this allocation, a new spine road will be provided linking London Road through to the roundabout with John Nike Way. This spine road will remove commercial traffic from immediately in front of the properties within Northview, providing an access through the new development to existing commercial development at Amen Corner South, and providing a link from the Western Employment Area through to the B3408 London Road. The site plan shows the route of the existing road in pink. I'm afraid it is quite faint at this level, but you can probably hopefully see my cursor. And the agreed route of the spine road is shown in relation to the proposed development, and that's shown in yellow here. The application proposes the erection of a commercial building with a total floor area of 4,840 square metres, comprising 4,111 square metres on the ground floor, with 729 square metres of ancillary office space at first floor level. Access from the site would be from John Nike Way, as per the existing, providing an in-out access arrangement through the realignment of the existing two access points. And I'm just pointing to that there, hopefully you can see with my cursor. It is proposed that the building could be used for either Class B2, which is general industrial use, or Class B8 uses, which is storage and distribution. Alternative parking arrangements are shown on the plan, which would be required to be provided dependent upon which use was implemented. 66 spaces are provided at the front of the building, so this is this area here in between Jubilee House and the proposed building, and to its side here. And a further 63 spaces are provided to the southwest of the building within the delivery yard, and will be required in the event that a B2 use is implemented. In addition to the parking intended to serve the new building, a further 44 parking spaces would be provided to serve the ski slope should it come back into use. I'll just show you the floor plans. Not much to see really, but this is the ground floor plan of the industrial building. And then the second one is the first floor plan showing the limited element of ancillary office space at first floor level. These show the elevations of the building. The building would have a parapet height of 12.5 metres and a maximum height of 14.25 metres. It would be finished in vertical micro-rib cladding in shades of grey. Planted green panels will be provided on the building's southeast elevation, and you can see them here. This is the roof plan, which shows roof-mounted solar panels with a green roof even on the flat roofed area. A landscaping scheme has been submitted which shows tree planting along the site's frontage with John Nike Way, landscaping within the site, and a substantial planted buffer along the site's southern boundary. This landscaping scheme has also been assessed by the Biodiversity Officer, who confirms that it provides an acceptable measurable net gain in line with the NPPF. Turning to the consideration of the application, the site lies within the settlement boundary, and upon the adoption of the new local plan, Jubilee House will fall within the Western Employment Area. In accordance with both adopted and the emerging local plan policy, there's no objection in principle to the development. However, as set out in the report, there are a number of specific issues that need to be considered, and I'll summarise these briefly now. Firstly, the loss of the ice rink. The application is accompanied by evidence confirming that the leisure use of the land as an ice rink and ski slope has not been profitable over the period of 2014 to 2020. They were closed to customers due to the pandemic restrictions and subsequently decommissioned. The ice rink site has now been sold to the current applicants. The site has been marketed for a period in excess of 12 months with no interest. A leisure and recreation facility report has been submitted which refers to reduced leisure demand resulting from cost of living concerns and the availability of leisure opportunities within the town centre as a result of the development of the Lexicon and the provision of the Ozone Ice Rink in Western Road. For the purposes of planning policy, the ice rink falls within Class F2 of the use classes order and is deemed to be a community use. Both adopted development plan policy and national planning policy framework envisages circumstances where a loss of such a facility can be permitted if it's replaced by an improved facility at a suitable location. In this instance, there's an agreed plan for improvements at the Bracknell Leisure Centre with a funding shortfall of £324,000. This scheme was approved by the Executive in June 2023 and includes the provision of a children's soft play area, 2 refurbished squash courts, a new studio and an upgraded spa area. The applicants have agreed to the payment of this contribution, which would secure an approved facility in a suitable location, and subject to a Section 106 agreement securing this payment, it's considered that the loss of the community use is satisfactorily mitigated and therefore is acceptable in policy terms. Now looking at the provision of the B2B8 use. The evidence based to the emerging local plan indicates that there is a shortfall in the provision of industrial and warehousing floor space in relation to needs over the plan period, and as referred to on the supplementary report, this was accepted by the inspectors in their post-hearing letter. Main modifications have been proposed to the relevant policy LP27, which relates to employment development outside designated employment areas but within settlements, which confirms that the council will support new industrial and warehousing development where it will not cause unacceptable adverse impacts. The matter of environmental impacts will be considered shortly. However, subject to members being satisfied on these issues, emerging local plan policy is supportive of the provision of a B2B8 use on this site. The ski slope is not currently in use. However, the application secures a total of 44 parking spaces to serve this facility should it be brought back into use. An existing building is available to provide administrative functions for the ski slope, and accordingly it's considered that the proposed development does not prejudice this remaining recreational use on the site. Whilst there's a historic occupier restriction on Jubilee House, restricting its use to purposes ancillary to the leisure use of the adjoining land, National Planning Policy Guidance confirms that such conditions are rarely appropriate, as any planning permission should run with the land. The use of the building for office purposes is entirely consistent with the development plan policy for the employment area within which the site will be located upon the adoption of the local plan, and so there's no policy objection to the removal of the occupation condition. Looking now at the potential impact of the development. The site, as mentioned, will, upon the adoption of the local plan, be partly located within the Western Employment Area and is adjacent to commercial development along its northern edge and to the southeast with the construction of the data centre. However, it's recognised that there are some residential properties within the immediate vicinity. The application proposes a large-scale industrial building, however it's not disproportionate with others in the vicinity and replaces the ice rink, which was also of significant scale. The choice of materials will assist in breaking up the bulk and massing of the building, and substantial landscaping is proposed. This section provides details. It's a section taken parallel to the southeast elevation and shows the outline of the former ice rink outlined in orange. The nearest residential properties are located in Northview to the south of the site, although as previously noted, the intervening environment between these dwellings and the site will change as a result of the construction of the Spine Road. At the nearest point, these dwellings will be set 63 metres away from the proposed building and 45 metres away from the delivery yard. Full details of the level changes across the site have been provided and satisfactorily confirmed that the built form of the building will not adversely affect neighbouring properties. The application proposes a development that could potentially be used 24 hours a day and the applicant has confirmed that a condition restricting hours of operation would be commercially unacceptable. Accordingly, careful regard has been given during the consideration of the application to assess the development's impact in terms of traffic movements, noise and lighting on adjacent occupiers. The Highways Officer has assessed the submitted modelling and confirms that although the level of HGV movements associated with the site may increase above those associated with the lawful use, those anticipated across a typical day are not excessive, estimated as being about 35, and with the construction of the Spine Road, HGV movements along John Nike Way are expected to decrease over time. A noise impact assessment and operational noise management plan has been submitted and assessed by the Council's Environmental Health Officer. The impact assessment looks at potential impact as a result of vehicle movements and activities within the site and recommends the provision of a 3-metre high acoustic fence to be provided surrounding the delivery yard. And this is shown on the submitted plans. The management plan sets out measures in order to control noise, particularly those associated with nighttime working. Subject to conditions securing the provision of the acoustic fence, adherence to the operational noise management plan, and limitations on operational noise levels as set out in the addendum to the supplementary report, it's considered that the use of the site will not cause material harm to the amenities of adjoining properties as a result of noise. In terms of lighting, a proposed lighting scheme has been submitted, which the Environmental Health Officer has advised satisfactorily demonstrates that lighting levels required by the operation of the site will not cause light pollution to adjacent occupiers. However, the Biodiversity Officer is not satisfied that this appropriately takes into account its impact on biodiversity, and accordingly a condition, I just lost my, sorry, it seems to have gone to something else. Apologies for this. Hasn't worked. Hopefully that's back again. And accordingly, a condition is recommended which will require the submission and approval of a biodiversity sensitive lighting scheme. On the issue of emissions and air pollution, the application is submitted on a speculative basis with no end user in mind, and therefore no assessment of potential emissions is possible at this stage. However, should any use be introduced on this site which has a particular impact in terms of emissions, officers are satisfied that sufficient regulation is provided under separate legislation in order to protect the amenities of adjacent occupiers. Matters of drainage, contamination, sustainable construction, biodiversity net gain and archaeology have all been considered as set out within the report and are considered to be acceptable. So I'm now just going to show you some photos of the site. So the first few photos actually show the original ice rink that was on the site. This is taken from the parking area on the northern boundary of the site looking south towards North View. This is looking north, again with the parking area on the right and the ice rink on the left. And the same view a little further up along that in-out parking arrangement. And this photo shows the same view with the parking arrangement on the right, but the current position now the ice rink has been removed. This is a picture of the ice rink when viewed from North View. And another sort of a close-up of that. This picture is taken from within the site and shows Jubilee House. And the cone that you can see in the foreground, well, sort of the middle ground, shows the approximate position of the southeast corner of the building. This shows the existing boundary with North View, and the fencing has been moved to approximately represent the extent of the site boundary, as it will be as a result of this application. This is again looking along the southern boundary of the site, and again the cone that's notated is the approximate location of the southwestern corner of the building. This is looking along the western boundary of the site, and you can see the arrow points to the position of the additional parking that would be provided within the delivery yard. This is a view from the south, looking north towards the Toyota garage and with the building supplies merchant behindhand. This is a view which shows the site, but also shows the ski slope on the left, and then obviously looking up towards the Coppard Beach Hotel. Another view looking across the site. A view from the site looking across that parking area. And that's a photo showing Jubilee House on the right-hand side, which will be retained with no built form amendments. And then that just shows the existing parking standard, parking to serve Jubilee House, which meets current standards. So in weighing the planning balance, it's considered that the loss of the ice rink as a community facility can be appropriately mitigated through the payment of the agreed contribution. And on this basis, there's no policy conflict in regards to the loss of this use. The site retains the existing ski slope, and although no requirement can be made as to its future use, provision of adequate parking can be secured to ensure that this event is not prejudiced by the proposed development. There's a recognised demand for industrial and distribution floor space within Bracknell, and the emerging local plan supports its provision in areas beyond defined employment areas within settlements, subject to it not having any adverse impacts. In this instance, potential impacts have been assessed, and it's considered that through the design of the scheme and use of appropriate conditions, any material adverse impact can be avoided. Accordingly, the application is recommended for approval, subject to the prior completion of a Section 106 obligation in the terms set out in paragraph 11.1 of the agenda, and the conditions as varied by the supplementary report and its addendum. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, thank you very much, I should say, with the loudspeaker on. So now we will invite our speakers to make their representations. So, Alethea Bunker, would you like to take your place? And just press the button on there to speak.
Hello.
You'll have 3 minutes to speak, and 20 seconds before the end I'll say 20 seconds. But you can carry on speaking till I say stop. I've half a tick, I'll re-find the clock. Are you ready?
Yes, thank you.
Great. So
Thank you very much.
Yep.
So we live on Northview at Northview House, and all of our neighbours along the road are very, very concerned about this planning application. Our main concern, obviously, is the sound. I know that people think that it's an industrial commercial area where we live, but actually there is no noise after about 6 o'clock in the evening. The only noise we have after 6 o'clock in the evening is you have 4 kebab vans that return to Scott's Farm every night at predictable time of night, late night at the weekends, earlier on weekdays, and then you have 1 lorry that goes down to the Every depot at the farm at about midnight and comes back at about 1 o'clock in the morning. And those noises disturb me, just because they're so rare, because it's so quiet. And at the weekends, it's ever so quiet. I don't know if you've driven around that industrial area at the weekends, but there's no traffic. It's somewhere that you can practice your kids riding their bikes. You know, it's really, really quiet at the weekends, because now that you've got the Amazon Centre, that's got, 5 car movements a day, if that. And although you've got Jubilee Building, which has got HGVs, that's only 7 a.m. till about 5:30. And at weekends, that's only Saturday mornings. The Toyota garage is only business hours, and Donetti is also only quite standard business hours. So the area is so lovely and quiet at the weekends. It doesn't feel like anything like a commercial area. Even when the Nike Centre was there, nothing was open after 11 o'clock at night, and that was only really 2 nights a week that you would ever have noise from the Nike Centre. So for us, the idea of having HGVs, and the report says every 15 minutes, 24 hours a day, it just seems absolutely absurd right next to houses. The yard is literally opposite my front windows. And I know that the report says that the sound levels won't be bad, but it does say if my bedroom windows are closed. the sound levels won't be bad. And that just seems absolutely bonkers. We had trouble just from the air conditioning unit at the Nike Centre, and we had ever such a long time reporting with environmental and all sorts of things and fighting about the air conditioning unit they had there because that was loud and was disturbing, and we all won on that in the end, and they had to change it because it was too loud. So the idea that you can, even if they say that at night, what we'll do is we'll shut the shutters for everybody to empty their lorries and then open them again. If you're opening and shutting industrial shutters,
20 seconds.
seems mad. And then also, I just think the idea of it being a ski slope ever again is a lie, and that parking spaces for the ski slope will be used for Jubilee and for the Toyota garage because they already park there. That's all they want those spaces for. It's not going to happen at all. It's never going to be a ski slope ever again.
Thank you.
Thank
Well
you.
Shall we just take some questions for you?
Oh, yeah.
Does anybody have any questions of fact for the objector, please? No? No questions. Thank you then.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
And Mr. Riley, please. Thank you. Same thing, I'll tell you when to start. I'll give you 20 seconds warning when you've got 20 seconds left, and then I'll say stop.
Thank you.
Thanks. Ready to start?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. We've worked closely with your officers for them to bring this recommendation before you. We have been mindful of the concerns about potential noise raised by a few residents. We've sought to address these, and through discussions with your officers have agreed that the 3-metre high acoustic fence now included along the southern boundary, together with the measures set out in the operational management plan, will help to alleviate these potential issues. We've also discussed the volume of parking with your highway officer, who is confident that the amount of parking provided is appropriate. The proposal also provides sufficient access and parking for any future leisure use of the remaining ski slope site. We don't pretend that it's necessarily going to be a ski slope. It is also worth noting that John Knight Way itself is a private road. Whilst it does have a weight restriction, this only applies to all but authorised uses, and the proposed scheme falls within the category of an authorised use as far as the owner is concerned. There are a number of substantial planning benefits with the proposal. One is the immediate delivery of a commercial building for flexible mixed employment, including general industrial and storage uses, together with the standalone office element, which has the potential to attract a high-tech business. The demand for industrial and warehouse units has increased substantially in recent years, resulting in low levels of supply in Bracknell. There are no units of a comparable size currently available or in the pipeline in the town. The proposal is supported by both Bracknell BID and Berkshire LEP and will contribute to the floor space need, ensuring inward investment into the town. Secondly, the proposal retains the opportunity for the ski slope or other leisure use to be used in the future. The ski slope and ice rink were loss-making for 5 to 6 years prior to the pandemic, and that was the final straw, resulting in its closure in 2020. As you've heard, it's now derelict, and despite being marketed for over a year, there's been no meaningful interest in its current use, and the contribution of $324,000 to upgrade and enhance the Bracknell Leisure Centre has been agreed as a suitable 106 payment as an acceptable offset in policy terms, as you've heard. Other planning benefits include between 67 and 124 new operational jobs, depending on the final user, a highly sustainable credentials with the proposed targeting BREEAM Excellent, EPCA Plus, carbon net zero, and 20% from on-site renewable generation, circa 16 million investment in repurposing the site and bringing it back into use, and achieving more than 10% biodiversity net gain, including increased high-quality landscape planting, green roof elements, and a net increase of 100 trees on the site. Accordingly, we agree with the officers that in weighing the planning balance, the compliance with policy and the planning benefits proposed outweigh any other material considerations against the development.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I've had this trouble before. Stop. Sorry.
That's another £20.
Oh dear. Oh dear, it's adding up. Any questions for Mr. Rice, please?
Yes, I have a question.
Yep. Councillor Regan.
Councillor Regan, yes. So the officer showed a diagram which shaded in red, so the boundaries of the application, which includes the ski slope. However, I understand the applicant doesn't own the land of the ski slope. Why didn't you purchase that so it could be fully included in the development plan?
The honest answer to that is I'm not 100% certain, other than it wasn't up for sale, as far as I'm aware, from the owners of the ski slope site.
Thank you. That's not entirely relevant, I have to say, but thank you. Any other questions?
Well, I disagree, because as you heard the other speaker, the resident thinks that she doesn't believe that the ski slope will come back into operation, but the planning application talks about the retention of the ski slope. So that's why I think it's a relevant question.
I would say that actually it could be something else, but it's the potential of being used for some leisure activity that's important. Councillor Barnard.
Thank you. Given the sort of changing pattern of noise on the site, and I say that with the understanding, of course, we've described that there will actually be a spine road in the vicinity in the future. I'm no acoustic expert, but what is in your view, the assessed impact of the 3 metre high acoustic fence? Because if you're starting with a fairly, not very noisy background, I mean, how much noise does it take away? Or does it sort of muffle, deaden? I mean, there's someone here who's possibly more of an expert than I am in this, but it's just understanding what you feel the impact of that will be.
I'm not an acoustic expert myself. However, the reports that have been done demonstrate what those the actual impact's going to be. And during discussions with your officers, it was felt that putting a 3 metre acoustic fence there would alleviate that. And your environmental health officer agrees with that position, and it reduced the levels down somewhat. Yeah.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. To further Councillor Barnard's question with regards to noise, obviously the nearby residents have expressed their concerns, particularly around noise, quite eloquently. From my understanding of the proposals, there's a combination of 2 elements to mitigate the noise. There's the fence, which is obviously a fairly straightforward thing to build, and then there's the operational noise management plan, and both of those aspects together, as I understand, are necessary to achieve appropriate noise criteria at the nearby residential properties. Obviously, this is currently a speculative development. You don't have an occupier kind of lined up. You don't know exactly how they're going to use it. How are you proposing to ensure that? Obviously, it is in the planning conditions, but what steps are you proposing to take to ensure that any future occupier user complies with that noise management plan, and that residents don't find themselves down the line in a scenario where actually they're exposed to unacceptable levels of noise?
Any future incoming tenants will be obviously notified and given all the information that was submitted with the planning application. In addition, your officer has said tonight there'll be an extra condition in terms of the levels of noise. So that's an extra level of protection, if you like, that can be looked at in terms of enforcement if necessary. But our clients will be making sure that incoming tenants are fully aware of all the conditions that there are and what's in the reports in terms of expressing noise levels.
A supplementary?
Thank you, Chair. Marta suggests it's something that would be wise to include in the tenancy agreements as a legal obligation on the tenants as part of their contract.
again, I'm sure that will be along with all the other issues that have been raised.
Thank you.
Councillor Reagan.
Thank you, Chair. So you outlined the economic case, which was demand for warehousing, which is fair enough. But the applicant has applied for a B2, which is industrial. Why have you gone for industrial if you believe that most demand's going to come from warehousing?
From a commercial perspective, it's important for an applicant to have most flexibility for a site. And in discussion with officers originally, we were looking at both light industrial, general industrial and warehousing. And for various reasons, particularly parking, we had to remove the light industrial element as it requires more parking. But having a B2 element, whilst we don't believe that will be the end user, it allows the flexibility from a commercial point of view.
Supplementary.
So there's been a lot of discussion about the noise, but as it was said in the officer's report, a B2 opens a possibility to other forms of pollution. But there's no consideration in the report at the moment about those possibilities of pollution. I know that residents are going to be protected by relevant legislation, but wouldn't it be better, just really, have you considered, as the applicant considered, other forms of pollution under the B2 categorisation?
I think this might be one for the officers, but...
All I would say is that we have submitted an air quality impact assessment as well, which was assessed by your officers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. Councillor Karim.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Councillor Karim. Given the concerns of at least one of the residents that's been expressed, has there been any consideration to the frequency of noise, particularly when they're not in a position to close their windows, for example, with the kind of summers that we're experiencing and expecting to get warmer, and people needing to open their windows? Thank you.
Again, the submitted noise impact assessment addressed all those issues, and the noise operational management plan reflects the current position as far as we understood it. And as far as we're concerned, your officers, your environmental health officer, concurs with what was in that report.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. Anyone else? No? I think that's it. Thank you very much. So I think we have at least a couple of questions for our officer. Councillor Barnard, please.
Thank you very much. So one of the complexities when considering noise here, of course, is the spine road, which has been considered and discussed elsewhere. How can we as councillors sort of try and understand the balance between the noise which will be generated by that road, which is not part of this application and therefore is something that will be there, and the use of the site? Because normally, and I think, I have a lot of empathy and understanding with the residents, you can consider, traffic movements in a site on its own in relation to the environment. But when that spine road comes, if it's anything like, the spine roads in Warfield, that traffic will be going, sadly, 24/7 and things. So the question I'm trying to understand and ask is, how do we make that assessment? Because we had another application where we were concerned about lorries changing gear, the additional noise and things that are being made there. How should we try and reconcile that? Because clearly it is an issue for local residents. I know there's a lot of stuff in the report, but it's trying to get that slightly, bigger understanding. And it was useful to see the site on Saturday, so thank you for the site visit. But just trying to understand how we best assess that in our minds. Thank you, Chair. The officer through you, thank you.
Could you switch off your mic? Thanks.
Absolutely.
Through you, Chair. Yes, I think it might be helpful to speak to my colleague, the Environmental Health Officer, who is on this call. The reason being is because I asked a similar question in relation to the proposed additional condition to try and understand the mechanism for measuring and to sort of separate out potential noise and disturbance from the operation of the site from that of the spine road. And I'm afraid it was quite a technical answer. So if you don't mind, could I defer
I suspected
to
it might have been.
Suzanne, who's on the call? Thank you.
Please. Thank you. Suzanne, Environmental Officer, sorry.
Good evening, Chair. So to answer that question, when we're undertaking noise complaint monitoring, we will take into consideration with operations happening and without happening. So regarding this particular application, the noise from the actual operations on site are required to be taken into consideration. The effect of the new road is not part of this application. If that answers the question, Chair.
Does that answer the question, Councillor Barnard?
Well, it sort of states the understanding for the site, but if I've got this right, the spine road is going to happen anyway, because that's been agreed elsewhere. So it's just trying to say, well, unfortunately, there will be this spine road. So I'm trying to get a sense, you know, if there was a spine road with existing traffic on it, how we would then assess this, because that's kind of relevant because it will happen in the short time scale, won't it? So I'm trying to stay within the remit of the question, and I'm not sure if I'm succeeding.
I don't think we can really get an answer to that because it is a separate application. I mean, the spine road is going to be there, whether we like it or not. And so I think we only consider the noise from the site on this application.
Explain why I asked the question, because that might help. Because I asked the question because if that road wasn't going to be built, then I think the noise movements would have a different kind of significance in all of this, because it would be like introducing a completely new building to an existing road. The fact that at the moment we've got something which will change rapidly, I think is important in our deliberations, how we understand what that actually means, because it is a very different situation. So if this building came along after the spine road, it would be incremental noise to an existing 24/7 road. You see, I'm trying to understand, we talk about balance all the time, where that kind of sits in this, because it is clearly a very key issue for local residents.
Is there an answer to that, please?
Well, Chair, I would say that obviously that is part of a different application, and the noise impact from a road is separate to this application. This application is looking at the noise impact from the proposed development. Sorry, I don't feel as if I've got any further comment I can make on that. I don't know whether anybody else can.
Can I just ask then, is the new building going to appear before the spine road?
That's not something that we can actually confirm or control in any way. The conditions have been worded in a way that they apply specifically to this building if it came forward in advance of the spine road, and they wouldn't be prejudiced if it was subsequently constructed.
And there are no vehicle entrances on that new spine road?
No, that's correct. All the vehicle movements will be directed from John Nike Way, which is obviously the existing access to the site, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. To perhaps try and tease an answer out, which I think might help Councillor Barnard get to the root of the question. Perhaps could ask if the officer could explain, were there subsequently noise complaints raised to Environmental Health about this? How could you explain how you would go about investigating that and taking measurements specifically to ascertain the contributions of noise that are from the site rather than from the spine road? I think that's what Councillor Barnard's trying to get to.
Yes, please.
So, Chair, to answer that question, should we receive a complaint once should this development be agreed with these conditions? We would need to undertake noise monitoring both at times when there are no operations on site happening and with the operations happening. So you look at the difference between the two. that monitoring would be undertaken using noise monitoring equipment, but would also involve officers on site and off site to make to look at, to see exactly what is happening at a particular time. So you can make sure that if there's a particular noise from a vehicle, is that from an HGV? Is it arriving? Is it leaving? Is it unloading? Is it loading? Is there other noise from other vehicles on site, or plant and equipment being used, forklift trucks, etc. So you're looking quite specifically at the noise levels that you're monitoring and exactly what's actually happening. And then off-site, you would be undertaking that monitoring at the closest noise sensitive receptors. So in this particular case, those properties in Northview, such as Northview House and the Old Chapel, are the closest residential properties. So that's where monitoring would take place to represent those receptors. Should noise be should it be appropriate, you would look at monitoring at other parts of site, such as Braeside, if you were looking at noise impact from the north part of the site as opposed to the south.
Thank you. I think that's a very useful answer. Any other questions, please? Councillor Collins, please.
Sorry, thank you. Section 9.46 of the officer report suggests that traffic movements will be limited to 35 per day. However, our residents suggested there was going to be a movement every 15 minutes, which by my reckoning comes out at 96 movements a day. That's quite a difference. I'm not sure where the every 15 minutes came from, but can you assure us that those traffic movements of the maximum of 35 is correct?
Through you, Chair, James Turner, Highways Officer. In relation to the 35, that figure. I can talk about that figure. I might defer to my colleague about any other comments that have been made. That comes from the traffic analysis that's been undertaken by the applicant for the proposal versus the existing use, and that has come. They've utilised our traffic model to model the site on the wider network, but also used appropriate trip rates from recognised databases for the types of use that are proposed, the B2 that was mentioned and the B8. And that's where that figure of the 35 is relating to, which are typical trip rates made up from previously surveyed sites. I'll have to defer to my colleague on the comments that are made in the 35, the 15 minutes.
Yes, I'm afraid I'm not. I assume that also comes from the transport statement. I'm afraid I'm not familiar with that. Yes, I'm afraid I'm not familiar with that. Whether that's if that's in the noise report, I couldn't point to that specifically at this stage.
Is anybody else?
I have some more questions if that's what you're asking.
Shall we hold on one moment while you have a look?
Councillor Hayes, I do have my hand up.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Hayes, please.
It's just to clarify the problem. Councillor O'Regan brought it up. It is. I know that we have, and I apologise for my breathing, and I'm hoping, Joe, you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
The application in itself, I understand, but as you saw, what I have asked clarification on the design element of it, because the ski slope again, and I know it's not something that's equivalent to what the size of everything else is, but I do have this feeling that the 44 parking spaces as well, clarifying that what would happen if the ski slope doesn't come into verification, the design element of everything, why was it included in the first place to begin with?
Thank you, Councillor Hayes. Joe?
Yes, the reason for including those parking spaces was to ensure that the that particular element, the leisure use, wasn't sterilised. So, for, as an example, if the parking had taken up too much of the site, so that there wasn't any parking able to be provided to serve the ski slope, then it would effectively sterilise that leisure use and would prevent it coming back into operation. And so that was the reason that it was required to be included as part of the application.
Thank you.
For legal reasons.
Well, for matters of good planning, we couldn't recommend approval of an application which would allow development on this site without considering if it had any implications for adjoining uses.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions, please? Councillor Reagan.
Yes, through you, Chair. I'm just thinking about the character of the employment area as it's designated. So could the officer just brief us on if there are any other B2 use buildings in this employment area currently?
Officer?
I can't provide specific examples, but there will be the Western Employment Area. It is an area that's specifically designated as being appropriate to accommodate industrial development and warehousing development. So whilst I don't have a list of B2 uses in the immediate vicinity, that would be an appropriate use for that area, and I would be fairly confident that there are B2 uses in that vicinity.
Thank you. Supplementary or no?
No, I have another question though.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving away from the B2 topic to the ski slope. So we're moving from a ski centre ice rink to a B2 factory, potentially. There is a loss of amenity, and that loss of amenity has been calculated and is covered by a 106 agreement. Does that 106 agreement calculate the loss of amenity for the ice rink part or for the entire site, which includes the ski slope?
Yes, the calculation relates to the loss of the to the ice rink, because obviously the ski slope as a leisure use is being retained on the site, and so there's no need to make any kind of calculation for its loss. As mentioned, the policy, both national and adopted local policy, suggests that the loss of a community use can be mitigated by the provision of an upgraded facility somewhere else in a suitable location. And so the quantity of the contribution has really been calculated by the fact that there is a costed project that will improve facilities at Bracknell Leisure Centre. There's a shortfall in funding for that project, and therefore the contribution to be provided will facilitate that improved facility coming forward, and therefore mitigating the loss of the ice rink specifically on the site.
Thank you. Supplementary?
Yes, again through you, Chair. So I think you've outlined the methodology for calculating the loss of amenity. And it's a figure in excess of £300,000, if I understood or heard correctly. But there's going to be no extension to the Bracknell Leisure Centre. It is refurbishment of existing facilities. So my question is, could you tell us more about the methodology, the cost-benefit analysis, which is used to calculate the 106 agreement?
Through you, Chair. So it isn't a specific calculation as such, because the policy requires there to be an improved facility. And in this instance, when we're seeking contributions, they have to meet the SIL regulations and to be reasonably necessary. And in this instance, There, as I mentioned, there was a costed project, and by making this payment, it would facilitate that project for an approved facility to come forward. £324,000 is because that is the shortfall in the costed project, not because there's any kind of specific numeric calculation between the extent of the, the size, for example, of the ice rink or the type of facility, and the need for it to be mitigated.
Thank you. Okay.
Other people.
Councillor Penfold first.
Right. The ski slope is left, in theory, as a leisure use. If in, say, 5 years' time, nobody has taken up the offer to reopen it and refurbish it, will that area still remain leisure use, or will it be redesignated? Or don't you know?
Through you, Chair. So the planning system doesn't operate to undesignate areas other than through the local plan process, or make any designations. So if it wasn't to come forward, there would be nothing as part of a planning application that could ensure that an alternative use was provided. It would be down to the owners of the site to propose something. Obviously the local plan process does look at designating particular sites, but I think in this instance it would be quite difficult given the fact it is a former landfill site and there aren't any sort of immediately obvious sort of solutions for it.
Yes. I feel it's... Although money has been provided for the SO6 money for the leisure centre, I feel we are having a loss of the variety of facilities in our area. Yes, we have got a new ice rink, but it doesn't seem to be as accessible as the old one was. Is it? Maybe I just don't know about it. I know it's there, but that's all. Is it open to the public in the same way John Light was? Or just for lessons and for private things?
I could answer that if necessary. Yes, I was looking it up on its website today. It has public sessions through the weekend, but I think it's more geared up to training and a different aspect of skating from that the Nike Centre used to use.
Yeah. That was the impression I had. None of the Friday night discos anymore.
Not sure about discos.
It was the Friday night John Nike Leisure Centre. The secondary school kids, it was the night they dreamed of.
Councillor Smith, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just returning to Councillor Collins' question with regards to the traffic numbers, there does appear to be a discrepancy in the figures presented in the reports. So the figure in the officer's report states 35 movements a day. The report submitted by the applicant's acoustic consultant for their assessment talks about 53 movements a day, although I do know it breaks it down, so it's 46 movements between the hours of 6 a.m. and midnight, and then it's 1 movement per hour between midnight and 6 a.m. is what they state. The question is, can we get some clarity on what the right numbers are?
Assistant Director would like to speak, please.
Yeah, through you, Chair, and I'll see if James or anyone else has got any other comments, but I would imagine that the noise report is looking at sort of worst case scenarios, whereas the transport report, as James described, the highways officer described, is looking at a typical traffic generation for that use based on the data sets that he referred to.
Just if I could, through you, Chair, if I could just add to that, Assistant Director of Planning has confirmed what I would have said. Just to be clear, on a highways perspective, the difference between 35 and 53 in highway impact terms would not cause a concern to the Highway Authority. Just to be clear on that point, I appreciate your concern about the noise, but just wanted to add that for clarity. But in terms of the point, the 35 does come from the process that the Assistant Director referred to.
Thank you. Councillor Collins, did you want to further that?
I was going to ask a similar question. I don't suppose, well, I'll ask the question, is there any way we can limit that so that if traffic movements became excessive, i.e. more than has been suggested in either way, is there anything that can be done in the future about that? I mean, I would have thought warehouses would have not constant traffic, but a lot more than is being actually suggested.
Good question, but I don't know how we'd tell. Does Highways Officer have any answer?
I think in terms of vehicular movements, obviously there is a limitation because of the size of the building, and the Highways Officer has undertaken that calculation, as has already been said, on the basis of standard trip generation that has been used on other sites. So there is a reasonable expectation from that body of evidence that it's going to be sort of ballpark figure is going to be correct. Just going back to the figure in the noise report, obviously that's taking a sort of slightly worst case scenario, and the noise report provides evidence, and our environmental health officer has advised that the measures, both the acoustic fencing and also the measures set out in the operational noise plan, will be sufficient to mitigate any adverse impact from, as identified within the report, which, as you've identified, is a higher level of traffic generation than is suggested by the highways data. So on that basis, I'd be fairly satisfied that the noise measures we're putting in place would be sufficient.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Barnard.
It's just struck me it's something where our legal advisor might be able to help. There's been a lot of talk that if this planning application is approved, then a 106 contribution has been identified to go to a very specific project, the Sports and Leisure Centre. I'm just seeking clarification that although there is a link, there is no direct link, that we consider this on the planning merit, and therefore that should a planning application be approved, there is 106 money for leisure, and we have suggested and agreed that this might be good use for it. So, because I think we just have to be really careful about this, Chair, that, you know, for members of the public that are maybe watching and listening, that this isn't in its own right a reason to approve a planning application, but it's reasonable in policy terms to make a contribution towards leisure. We just happen to have, you know, decided that this would be compromised. I just think we need to be clear about that, because it's this sort of thing in the era of social media that could get misrepresented. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Chair, through you, thank you, Councillor Barnard. I thought I was going to have a quiet meeting today, but not so. Yes, so the Section 106 hasn't been drafted yet. When it is drafted, the definition of where this contribution can be applied to will mean that it will be that shortfall that it addresses. The applicants have accepted that already, and it's been agreed, so therefore I see no problem with a Section 106 being drafted and signed and completed on that basis. The SIL Regulation 122 does require any contributions to be related to the development and necessary, but I think sufficient, from what I've read in the officer's report, there's sufficient grounds to accept that the SIL regulation has been complied with in this case.
Thank you very much for your answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I follow on from the...
Councillor Hayes, sorry, online.
No, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Chairman. It just falls into the same category because, again, we're looking at the ski slope, the legalities of the parking and 106. How do that define in legal part of it for future planning?
Do you want to answer that?
I don't actually understand that question.
Not sure we understand.
Question put to legal. I'm not quite sure what's being.
If not legal, to planning, because at the end of the day, it has been incorporated within the defines of the planning curtilage, what happens in the future with the slope and the 106 and the parking. Do we end up with 106 still being appropriate for that slope as well? We are combining two sites here.
Through you, Chair, if I've understood correctly, so the Section 106 contributions relate to this application. If the ski slope were to be brought into use and future development was proposed for that site, we would have to consider it on its own merits, and there would be a potential for that application to also be subject to a Section 106 agreement. But the obligations in this instance relate specifically to the development that is currently being proposed. I don't know if that answers the question or not.
As long as that is clarified within the papers, that at a future date, because that site of the slope will come back into mitigation, because there is the parking of the 44, and that is in the document, and therefore should be identified.
Oh, sorry, Chair, just to follow up on my response. Yes, the conditions are worded, so it wouldn't be a matter for the Section 106 agreement, but the conditions are worded to ensure that that parking is provided for the ski slope should it come back into use.
Or whatever use it should come back as.
Well, it's specifically in relation to the ski slope, because if an alternative use was provided for that site or proposed for that site, an alternative planning application would be required, and that would be considered on its own merits.
Right, but the parking belongs to that site. Yeah.
The parking would be secured for the ski slope. Yes.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Pardon? Yes, that's true. This is a meeting in public, but not a public meeting. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's one of those things. I'm sorry we can't take your question. Councillor Regan has been waiting, I believe.
It's okay, I'll defer.
I think, a comment has come to our attention about parking. My question is, sufficient parking has been provided for that ancillary to the site, regardless of class use, and I think that's all we can go on, isn't it? And that additional provision. So, because I do believe that at the moment in front of the centre, some of the parking there is just because it's there.
Yes.
I think it's probably a technical word for that, but I think it's an important point to make sure that the site will, just doubly confirm the site will consume its required parking, as we saw on Saturday.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. And so the parking is provided to serve the intended uses, including the retained ski slope, and there is no requirement to provide parking to serve other off-site uses.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Barnard's previous question with regards to the 106 payment, I think, does raise an interesting issue in it's obviously a sizable sum of money, and that runs the risk of looking like the applicant might be paying the council for planning approval.
And that's what I was trying to just clarify.
Could I just ask the officers to give us crystal clear clarification that that's definitely not the situation, and perhaps explain, just to make sure it's very clear for the members of the public listening, the purpose of that payment and where that sits within the planning policy and why that's necessary in this case?
Thank you. Yes.
Through you, Chair. So yes, the both policy CS8, which is in our adopted core strategy, and also national planning policy envisage, or they seek to retain valued community uses where possible. But they do specifically foresee a circumstance where the loss of an existing community use could be accepted, provided that mitigation is provided in the form of an improved facility on a suitable site. So when looking at this particular application and in identifying whether it does or does not comply with that policy, it is relevant to see if you can secure sufficient mitigation, i.e. an improved facility elsewhere on a suitable site. And so, and in order for that to be reasonable in planning terms, there has to be an alternative proposal. And in this instance, the alternative proposal is one, as I say, which has already been considered by the executive. So it's a costed proposal, but there was a funding shortfall, and it's on that basis that it's considered reasonable to request that particular contribution. And the reason for the contribution is to mitigate the loss of the community facility in order to ensure compliance with development plan policy.
Thank you very much. That's nice and clear. Councillor Reagan.
Yes, through you, Chair. So, yeah, just want to return to the topic we're discussing now, which is the loss of amenity and how we compensate for that. So the application, as we've established, it includes the ski slope, and as the officers explained, the compensation for the loss of amenity doesn't include the ski slope portion. The application is the application says the ski slope is going to be retained. So I want to explore through questions what do we mean by retention. So I can see that, and I welcome that the car parking has been put in place to bring it back into use. But has there been any commercial economic feasibility studies carried out to see the likelihood of that area coming back as a ski slope? Because it is mentioned as a ski slope. It does say retained as a ski slope in the application. So I just want to ask, has any studies been done to assess the likelihood of it coming back into use?
Through you, Chair. Yes, I think that would be a matter for the landowner. It's certainly not something that we would be required to do as part of this application. So the application doesn't propose any change to the use of the ski slope, which is accurately identified as being retained. As previously mentioned, our obligation is to ensure that there's nothing that would prejudice that future use. But it would be a matter for the landowners to understand the economics of bringing back that, bringing the use back into force.
Thank you very much. Other questions? Can I put a couple of questions to our highways officer, please? I found in the list of documents a memorandum, the consultee response. Has it got a date? 26th of October, with a whole list of things mentioning the lift for disabled access. To be conditioned as appropriate. I didn't know there was a lift in there. This is the right one, isn't it? Mixed use, yeah.
Through you, Chair, to you, Chair. I think you're referring to the nature of on the layout that, I don't know if we need to put the layout on the screen, but I think you're referring to a comment in relation to the car park closest to the ski centre. There is, because of the nature of the land at that point, there is an increase in level,
so
and to ensure that ensure that disabled users, if they wish to be at the facility, could get to the facility. There's a need to have a lift. I think that's the reference you're referring to.
Thanks.
If you need to show indicative where it is, I'm sure the planning officer will try and roughly indicate where it is on the plan.
Right.
I think that's the reference.
And then on parking, at number 5, it said the response does not answer the concern if trees and higher planting is expected between the parking and the boundary. Such planting over time could grow out and impact the footway outside the site. So the type of species chosen and position of trees will need to be such that this would not occur. Confirmation for the landscape officer may be required. Did you get that?
Sorry, through you, Chair. I may let my colleague answer that because it's coordination of different responses.
I would just sort of confirm that the October responses from the highways officer is not the final response, so the consultation that you're looking at. And so subsequent to that, we've received revised plans, and the intention of the revised plans is obviously to address any concerns that have been raised and to ensure, and when we receive revised plans, we then reconsult both the highways officer and the landscape officer. On the basis of the revised proposals, both officers have confirmed that they're now acceptable to them. So I would assume that those specific queries have been overcome.
Yes, thank you. That I didn't think think ahead enough. Okay, does anybody have any other questions? So now it's time to debate. So I need to propose the recommendation with the amendment that's on the, as a result of the supplementary report, the additional condition, is it?
It's the supplementary and the amendment.
Yeah, thank you, supplementary and the amendment to the supplementary report. So do I need to propose the amendments first? Okay. Thank you. So I need to put the recommendation on. Dear. The recommendation against number 5, the recommendation on page 58 of the agenda is amended by page 4 of the supplementary report and further amended by the addendum to the supplementary report. Okay, that's the proper wording instead of what I was trying to do. Okay, so did we get any questions about that? I don't think.
Propose it, and then
Yeah.
you need a seconder.
So I propose that this recommendation, as stated, do I have a seconder?
Yes, I think it's customary for me to second, so we can have a debate.
Thank you very much, Councillor Reagan. So, questions about that? Anyone with questions? I think it's debate only. Okay. So, who would like to open the debate on the recommendations as amended with the additional condition, operational noise levels, etc.? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I think by and large it's good to see an application coming forward for this site. It's obviously a redundant site that's been out of use for a number of years, has formerly served the community very well, so it's very good to see proposals for that being developed. I hope we see proposals at some point with regards to the ski slope as well, but that's obviously separate to this application. The loss of community use is obviously a concern to me, but I think, as discussed during the questions tonight, I would agree with the officer's view that the proposed 106 contribution and the benefit that brings to the community is suitable to mitigate the loss of the community land there. So I think particularly bearing in mind that although it is designated as community land, realistically the potential for this actually to come back in anything like the kind of former use is very, very unlikely. So I think I think there's a good deal there for the council and a good deal there for residents as a solution to that challenge. I do want to speak specifically to the noise aspects of the report. So other members of the committee will be aware, but the members of the public probably won't. I actually work professionally as an acoustician. So anytime we see noise as a potential concern on applications like this, it's an area that I pay particular attention to, and I hope my fellow members of the committee will attest that I'm quite rigorous in ensuring that we protect our residents from potential noise issues. The applicants obviously engaged an acoustic consultant who has reviewed the scheme. They've carried out surveys on the site to understand existing noise climate. And they've also been through quite a rigorous process with the council officers. So, the initial proposals were not deemed suitable, and they've been through a process of revising that and bringing in additional mitigations to the application to satisfy the council officers. I've reviewed that in quite a lot of detail, and personally I'm professionally satisfied that they have been through an appropriately rigorous process there to ensure that the noise impact is appropriately mitigated. But I do have some concerns that part of that is reliant upon this operational management plan. We have variable noise sources in terms of activity noise. It's very different to, say, mitigating something like an air conditioning unit, which is it's a static object that produces a defined noise level. The applicant's plan obviously puts in measures that they're going to implement to control noise and ensure that that stays within what's considered an acceptable noise level. That's determined based upon the existing noise climate that they've evaluated from the survey and also based upon limits which are defined in British standards. So they're very specific, rigorous methods for assessing that. Whilst I am satisfied that what they're proposing in the plan gets them to an appropriate noise level for you, I am always concerned with that kind of approach in that what really happens in practice, which is why we've had the addendum to the supplementary today, which brings an additional planning condition. And I just wanted to explain that, particularly for residents in the room. There's 3 planning conditions essentially in what's being proposed now in relation to noise. So there's a planning condition mandating the acoustic barrier and that needs to be provided and maintained. There's a planning condition that stipulates that they have to implement and apply the operational noise management plan. There's also now a final planning condition which quite rigorously stipulates essentially that the noise levels that they've said in their proposals they're going to achieve, that they will achieve, and if they don't achieve them, if they do exceed them, they will be in breach of the planning condition. I'm very grateful to the officers. I've been working with the officers this week, having discussions with them to try and see what we can do to tighten this up, and which has resulted in this condition. So I'm grateful that they brought that forward. The specific nuance of that for the residents is, without that, technically, yes, they should be achieving those noise levels, but enforcing that through sort of standard environmental health measures is always tricky, particularly with something that's a very variable source. And by bringing it in as a planning condition, it gives us an extra sort of layer of enforcement potential because it can now be enforced not just with regards to environmental health concerns, but specifically with regards to breach of the planning conditions. So it gives the council more powers to protect you. I'm satisfied personally on that basis. I'm sure that won't 100% wrap up your concerns, but I want you to understand it's something that and I'm sure the other members of the committee will take very seriously. I'm quite satisfied that we have a set of conditions here that are sufficient to protect residents. So on that basis, subject to any other points raised by my colleagues during debate, currently I'm minded to approve the application with those conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I thought Tina Mackenzie-Boyle wanted... No. So Councillor Barnard.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I'd like to thank Councillor Smith for the detail he's gone into, and on the noise things I'll say ditto and thank you, because it's a very technical area. One of the things when we look at a planning application are there material reasons why we can't support it and approve it, and because there are multiple steps around this, and I'd like to thank the officers in preparing this work, the supplementary reports we got, and I think Councillor Smith, you've articulated well, the additional conditions that have come in place. So in noise, there's nothing to add. So then you look at the general site, the principle. It was very sad when the ice rink and the ski soak closed, and it was lost to many generations of those in the borough who'd used it over many years. But the economics, not just of Bracknell Ice Rink, but other very similar facilities, are such that Bracknell Ice Rink is not the only one that has changed. And at least, if not on the scale, we have an ice rink left, and at least by condition in this, there is a contribution to provide leisure elsewhere, which is reasonable, and we've seen in many other applications. But let's be clear, we're deciding this on the merit, and that's an important condition. It shouldn't drive our decision making. It's an important part of that. So then you look and say, well, how does this building fit into the site? And I think there's very extensive landscaping that's been put in place. considerably more than than office developments and similar developments many years ago. I think the use of the materials will break it, and I was really pleased at the start that we had some photographs of when the ice rink was there, because we probably all have fond memories of it as an ice rink where we were inside it. I doubt whether it will ever win a RIBA award for its architectural scheme, and actually the reason for that is to say that a building will go back on that site that actually will be better integrated, I think, into the surroundings than before. So I don't believe that there are strong material reasons, unless others have them, to refuse this. I think everything has been appropriately thought through. I do recognise the noise from the site, and the reason I asked Chair about how we think about other developments is because this is going to be a very, very, developed, a very busy part, and I think for other developments and the residents, we need to be aware that it's going to fundamentally change over the next few years. But those things are outside the remit of this. So, considering the site on its own, I see no reasons not to support it, but I also see the benefits that were pointed out. There are some other benefits as well. We're mitigating leisure. We've put everything we can in place on the noise front. The building itself, I think, has been designed to a standard that will blend in. The landscaping is extensive. I noted that there are no conifers, but we're going to have evergreen species. That's fine. We can do that. But I think, it is the operational management plan that will determine how this works long term. And I think we've gone as far, and actually, as Councillor Smith said, by putting a lot of the noise stuff into conditions, it gives additional weight, and they're conditions that can be enforced or worked with. But as the local residents know, noise, environmental health, things that can go down the line, and I'm sure this is an application and a site we watch closely. So, but I'd like to thank finally Joe for the site visit on a cold Saturday. It was really good to get a sense and feel for how this would fit into the site, and it really would be good to see it brought back into use. Recognising the concerns, I think that they have been mitigated and addressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else want to speak?
Thank you. So when I read the application, I focused in on the implicit commitment to retain the ski slope. But on further examination, I see that it's fairly unlikely that that area will come back into operation as a ski slope. So I see within this application a further loss of amenity to the community. I also see the possibility that that area will deteriorate further and will become an eyesore, which is a further loss of amenity. And I understand that loss of amenity is a reason for rejecting an application. Now, again, the application is taken the whole site, talks about the whole site, but really is focused in on, let's say, one half of it, which is where the old ice rink was. So I have found it quite challenging to unpick and understand what the implications are for this planning application. Just speaking personally, I would have preferred that there'd be landscaping of the ski slope area, possibly removal of those ski mats which may be deteriorating. We haven't got any information or reports on that, and to open up the area to the public. We need all our green spaces in Bracknell, and I think it would have taken a modicum of additional planning and investment to bring that space back into public use, while the future of that space was determined by the owner. They're my observations for debate.
Thank you, Councillor Regan. Anyone else? So I'd like to just say a few things. I really welcome this additional condition with the technical data in it, measured at 1 metre from the nearest or most affected windows of any existing noise-sensitive property. That means whether the window is shut or open, the measure is there, and that will be enforceable. So we need to enforce. So I'm really pleased about that. I was a bit unhappy about the removal of a leisure facility in North Bracknell because everything's going to South Bracknell. But we do have another ice rink, although it's in a different, it's a different sort of use, but it is still open to the public and fun and games. I don't think we can really comment on whether the ski slope is viable or not, because it's not owned by this applicant. But it is available should they want to use it as a ski slope. The owner wants to use it as a ski slope, but it's most likely they'll come in with some other sort of use that hopefully everybody will be able to comment at that point. It is a bit of an eyesore, but I don't think there's much we could do about that for the moment. But at least this piece of land will no longer be derelict. It will be put to very good use. And I think there's really careful points in place to make sure that the noise levels and the movements are kind of buffered from the existing houses, and small roads are protected. So all in all, on balance, although I would love to have seen another leisure amenity in North Bracknell, I think we'll have to wait to find another place and another applicant to do that. It has to be viable in business terms, obviously, so we wait. But this is the best I think that we could do here at the moment, so I'll support it. Anyone else want to speak? No, I think the main thing here has been noise and traffic movements, and I think that we've gone into those points very carefully. So I think it's now time to put to the vote. Can we do all those in favour, please? All those against? And abstain? One abstention.
So it's carried.
Thank you, that's carried. And that being the end of the agenda, I thank you very much for all your input and your careful consideration. And that's the end of our meeting tonight. Thank you very much.